Welcome, everybody, to Firehouse Talks with Jersey Rick, igniting leadership excellence. I'm Rick, and this is my co-host, Emily.
Hi.
We've been talking about mentoring, but before we get into that, Firehouse Talks with Jersey Rick, Emily and I talk about anything and everything related to leadership, and we do come from it, do address it, I should say, from a biblical worldview. So, last episode, we talked about mentoring. We talked about a commitment to time. Today, we're going to talk about a commitment to be transparent, the power of clarity in mentorship. A couple of years ago, I had an early morning flight from Denver to Sacramento, and the sun was just coming up. And as we were flying over the Rocky Mountains, I had a window seat and I was able to look out and I could see the pink sky and the sun was turning the snow on the mountains pink. Then it was transparent. I mean, and it was a beautiful view. Now let's contrast that transparency as if that window had been fogged over and it was translucent, making it much more difficult to see what was below. Or if it was just blacked out window or the shade was pulled down when it couldn't see anything at all. So that's what we're going to be looking at today is transparency.
Yeah. So in mentorship, just like that window, clarity matters. If
Absolutely.
either the mentor or the mentee is foggy or blocked off, growth is hindered, or even worse, the relationship can just die off.
Yes, it can.
Like we already mentioned, we are focusing today on a commitment to be transparent. So let's just dive right on in.
Yeah, and let's take a look at some terms here when we talk about opaque, translucent, and transparent, just in case, people need to be reminded. Opaque, nothing gets through. And there are some people who are like that. They are very opaque. Nothing gets through to them. There's no honesty and there's no trust. That
Mhm.
does not lead to a good mentoring relationship. Translucent, some light gets through, but the picture is unclear. And from a mentoring standpoint, even a coaching standpoint, relationship standpoint, period, that's difficult with someone like that. And the last one is transparent. There's full clarity. Nothing is hidden.
Mhm.
And when we are transparent, that's when the relationships deepen. And then that's where we are going to grow as individuals who are being mentored. And the same thing goes for the person who is doing the mentoring. You need to be transparent as well, transparent with your failures. Because if you are so proud and egotistical, which we're going to be talking about, a commitment to kill the ego in a
Yeah.
future episode, but if you're so proud that you can't admit the failures that you've had, the mistakes that you have made, you're not going to help anybody else. And you're just putting up a barrier and you're no longer transparent. You're opaque. Nothing is coming out of you.
Yeah, absolutely. So applying it to mentoring, if either party is opaque, the relationship just breaks down. If it's translucent, the growth is slow and hesitant. But if there's transparency, that creates trust, safety, and the opportunity for transformation.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And thank you for clarifying that and repeating that, Emily, because
Yeah.
that's such an important point to go over.
And I think we've already like touched on this, but we just want to really emphasize
Yeah,
that if either party is opaque, not allowing any light to pass through, there will be no personal growth.
yeah, that's right. And people carry a lot of baggage into any type of a relationship. And without that transparency, there's no trust.
Mhm.
Without trust, there's not going to be transparency. So some of these common hesitations on the part of the person being mentored or the mentee is fear of being judged,
Yeah.
exposed, or reported. Now that last one, let me hit on that. I tell people when I mentor them, uh, it's confidential. And when I coach them, it's confidential, unless it's something where they are intimating that they're going to take their own life. At that point, there's no more confidentiality. I'm going to take it to the appropriate authority, or if they are saying, I committed X crime, you know, or I'm involved in this, that's illegal. That, hey, the gloves are off. I mean, somebody has done something illegal and they're telling that to me in a coaching or a mentoring relationship. I'm reporting it to law enforcement, period. Hands down,
Yeah.
hands down, absolutely. But coming back also, that fear of being reported, let's look at it from the most likely scenario. And that is, ooh, man, you just said something to me, and now I'm going to run to your boss and tell them what you said about them. That's a real fear that people have. And that is a prime reason why you should seek a mentor outside of the organization. Not
Hmm.
everything is rosy. There are some difficult people in organizations, and there are some difficult bosses. I won't call them leaders. There's difficult managers. I won't call them leaders as well, and how they treat people. And you really need to know how to navigate that.
Yeah.
But man, you could be stepping on a landmine by going to somebody in the organization and sharing that with them. Uh, Now, this is not from a mentoring relationship, but I'll give you an example of something that happened to me several years ago in the fire department. There was an individual who was part of the EMS, the Emergency Medical Services Committee, and the department was looking at sending out survey cards to people after we had responded to their house on a medical call. And the individual who was putting this together asked me what I thought. And I said, I think it's a bad idea. And he said, why? Shouldn't we be getting public feedback? I says, you know what? I said, when I was 14, I found my dad dead on the floor from a heart attack. And I says, the last thing we needed was from the fire company, it was a volunteer fire company, to send us a survey card saying, how did we do? Yeah, I said, I think that is a very, very touchy area. And I'm not in favor of that. And he says, huh, well, that's good feedback. I'm going to go talk to the chief. 15 minutes later, he and the fire chief came in the day room, and the chief was fired up. And I mean, he was in my grill about me not supporting the fire department and me undermining the program and so forth like that. It's like, what? I don't know what this other guy said to him, but he absolutely threw me underneath the bus.
Hmm.
So you need to be careful that from a mentoring standpoint, that you don't put yourself in that position that where you create an enemy within the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. So, your job as the mentor is to build trust, reassure confidently with expectations for legal and safety issues, like we already discussed, encourage honesty by being honest yourself, and set the tone of safety early. What's said here stays here.
Yeah. Yeah. And I reinforce that even when I'm doing a training with another organization and I'm doing a call to learn more about them and the challenges that they are facing. And been working with a particular fire department, and the individual I'm working with, because they want leadership training, he has shared some very sensitive information with me. And I've told him it doesn't go beyond you and me, and it doesn't. And that builds that trust. Now, we've also talked about, why it's important to mentor outside the organization. And I don't think I can overemphasize that point at all.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we want to ask our listeners, are you creating an environment that invites openness or one that stifles it?
Yeah. And I just thought of a quote that General Eisenhower, later President Eisenhower, said is, let us never confuse honest dissent with disloyal subversion.
Hmm.
And there are folks out there who are bosses that will take that and turn it around when you come and you do dissent and they turn it around. That creates an environment where people say, I'm not saying anything. I am not going to say anything at all.
Yeah.
Now, you as the mentor, if you carry that mentality into a mentoring relationship, that person on the other end there, they're not going to open up. They're not going to share the challenges that they face. They're not going to be asking for advice on how to, overcome some of the problems that they're dealing with at work. They're not going to share anything with you leadership related. One one thing that I have heard more than once in my career when I was a battalion chief, and I just this past week I had coffee with a chief officer in another fire department who's dealing with a pretty substantial personnel issue. And the officer that's reporting to him said, well, I just wanted to handle it myself because you promoted me to this rank and you expect me to be able to do it all. And, and hey, folks, that's a fallacy. You're in a supervisory position. You can't do it all. As a
Hmm.
battalion chief,
Yeah.
I could not do it all. I needed to get advice, and I had some pretty hefty personnel issues to deal with. And I needed some mentoring. I needed some advice from people, trusted people, obviously, on how to handle these things. So this concept of transparency and creating that environment, it is paramount.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So, being transparent means sharing your mistakes and how you grew from them, asking honest, open-ended questions, and that the questioning is huge, because we have the saying that questions stir the conscience, accusations harden the heart.
Yeah,
And so, coming in more curious and asking questions will help put your mentee's guard down
yeah.
as well and give them that space of freedom and openness.
Mhm.
And then listen without rushing to fix or judge.
Yeah, that, oh,
Honestly, that ties into asking more questions too. That's sometimes just even just in basic conversations. If I don't understand or I'm still trying to figure out like what my answer is, my how I work through it is I just keep asking more questions until I get to the answer or the answer of what I'm trying to figure out to say
yeah. Well, you
too.
you bring up a good point about asking questions, Emily. And one thing as the mentor, avoid asking the why questions. That sets it up for too easy of an answer. Now you can ask a question such as, what's preventing you from moving forward? What barrier are you facing? Or if you were talking to a good friend of yours, what advice would you give them in this type of a situation? Or how do you see the best way forward with this? Use the what and the hows and avoid the why
Yeah.
type questions. And also something I want to hit on too when we're mentoring somebody. Hey, listen, growing up in Jersey, it's very easy to be a wise guy, and make a wise crack. Be careful. Be careful with the wise cracks. Depends on the level of if you've got a really good relationship established with the other person, they might understand
Hmm.
what you're saying and they might laugh at
Hmm.
that. Um, but until you've got a really good, solid relationship with the other person, you should refrain from the wisecracks because they could completely take it the wrong way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't roll your eyes. I say, oh, that's pretty simple. Yeah, it's simple, but people do it. Don't roll your eyes. Watch your body language and your facial expressions when the person you're mentoring shares something with you. Don't say, oh, geez, anybody should know that.
Hmm.
Yeah, that avoid that sarcastic, those caustic comments. And then
Yeah.
another thing too, listen, if you're
Hmm.
one of these weenies who constantly practices the realm of cowardice of political correctness, don't mentor anybody because you ain't got the backbone to tell anybody the truth. All you are is a flag waver. That's all political correctness is, people. It's the realm of cowardly flag wavers. You're developing an answer to meet the audience that you're in front of. You have no integrity and no backbone. And it has nothing to do with being caustic or sarcastic. Nothing at all. The opposite. No, it has everything to do with if you're going to mentor any relationship, but if you're going to mentor somebody, be honest with them.
Hmm.
When you see an issue in their life, bring it up, confront it. You don't have to say, hey, you stupid jerk, this is what I see. No, you say, I'm observing this based off of your comments and what you are describing to me. But if you're politically correct and you're a coward, you ain't going to do it.
Yeah.
You are not going to say what needs to be said.
And you're hurting the mentee more than helping them grow
Yep,
by
absolutely.
refusing to call things out or challenge their thinking.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So we want to point out transparency is not weakness.
Mm.
It is the bridge to growth.
Oh, yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
Emily.
And so being a mentor or a mentee is a two-way window. It goes both ways. The mentor must be transparent, share stories of your struggles and failures, not just success. So your mentee knows that you're a real person with flaws and hardships and problems just as much as they have as well. Admit when you don't know something. You do
Yeah,
not have to know everything, and that's okay. That is okay. And model the kind of openness that you would expect.
yeah. Let's come back to what you just said. Admit when you don't know something. If you don't, that's your pride. That's your pride and
Yeah.
that ego. Now, it's absolutely impossible to know everything. And let your mentee know ahead of time. You know, when you start establishing a relationship, hey, there's things that I don't know. You may ask me a question that I don't have the answer for, but I will research it and I will either find an answer for you or I will find someone who can get that answer for you, or I will point you to a resource where that answer lies. But don't come across like you're Albert Einstein and yeah, everything. Well, actually, I've heard some of Albert Einstein's quotes, and he never admitted to knowing everything as well. And so, yeah, we've talked a lot about transparency on the part of the mentor and the mentee, and we all face challenges. And so, for those of you who are being mentored, yeah, don't have that fear of being judged that we just talked about a few minutes ago. Uh, there's nothing wrong with saying, this makes me nervous, or I'm not sure how I will be. That's a very common thing for people who are coming in the fire service on their first fire or their first medical call. And it's like, yeah, you've been through the training. Live fire in a controlled environment at the training area is one thing. Rolling up on a house or a commercial structure that's on fire is completely, totally different. And I've been there when I first came in the fire service. And that question is, will I measure up? Will I have the courage to do this job? And we never know until we are confronted by that. That if you're in that position and you've never been there before, it's okay. Say, man, I'm not sure, and encourage them, provide them the encouragement that they need. And I mentioned this earlier. Uh, hey, ask questions. Come prepared and ask questions. And
Mhm.
if you've got a specific area that you need help in, identify that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we have a tip for you to start the mentorship with a quote transparency talk to establish
Yeah, I like
expectations.
that.
But I kind of want to put a warning in with that is that you cannot expect your mentee to trust you right away.
Yeah.
Trust is built on time and safety and connection. So, the transparency talk is really just to I don't know, open up the door for that
Mm.
relationship to start building on the right foot, but not an expectation that they have to trust you.
Yeah,
Because if you
absolutely.
put that expectation on that they have to trust you, you're not a safe person.
Yeah.
I'm just going to be blunt
Okay.
about that.
Well,
You're
you're
not,
absolutely right. Thank you for bringing that up. If they say you must trust me, yeah, I'd end it right now.
yeah,
Yeah. And for
book number. No.
and for people who are going to be mentors, it may turn into a situation where you've worked with somebody for 6 months, a year, maybe even longer, and they've watched you, and then they come to you and say, "Hey, would you mentor me?"
Mhm.
And that level of trust has already been established. And that's
Yeah.
that's what happened with an individual that I have mentioned before. is we were working together for, I think it was 6 months. And then he came to me and said, "Hey, would you be willing to mentor me?" A level of trust had already been established that way. And usually, what I have seen is somebody else is going to come to me and say, "Hey, will you mentor me?" And the people that I look at, and I had mentioned the singles group that we have in our church, and the men that are in there that I mentor, I sit down with them over a cup of coffee. You know what? I have never officially designated this as a mentoring session. No, it's not. That's what's happening. But you don't have to say,
Hmm.
identify somebody and say, "Hey, I'm going to mentor you." No, how about you just say, "Hey, why don't we go to lunch, go to breakfast, get a cup of coffee,
It's being
and
there for
yeah,
them.
yeah, just be there for them
Yeah.
and establish that relation. You can start mentoring people without having it officially stamped as I'm the mentor and you're the mentee, and this is how it is going to be.
Yep.
Hey, that rhymed.
Good job. Yeah, so we want to ask our listeners, if you were a mentor, reflect on your current or future mentees and ask yourself, are you open?
Yeah.
And and then what are one or two personal experiences you could share to invite transparency?
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, I'll insert with my book, The Furnace of Leadership Development. There's more than one story in there about some of the failures that I've made. And, one of them was a really big one. And I struggled with, do I put this in this book or not? I was like, no, yeah, God was laying it on my heart to put that in the book, open that up, show people the mistake that you made. You might be saying, what mistake was that, Rick? Well, you could go to Amazon, search the Furnace of Leadership Development, and you could buy the book. It's in paperback, ebook, and audio book. So yeah, there's my plug for the book. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And with that ties into this question. Hey, what am I hiding that could be the very thing I need help with?
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's like, yeah, get over it. Get over that barrier. Ask yourself, what is preventing me from bringing this up?
yeah.
Is it my pride or is it my fear?
It takes, yeah, that I was just about to hone in on that because it takes courage to ask for help.
That does.
It takes a lot of courage and it takes courage to keep showing up and to be willing to open up that door.
Yeah, absolutely, Emily. Absolutely.
So we want to leave you guys with a challenge is clear one fogged window this week, which means have a deeper conversation with someone. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, and that again, that ties in with doesn't have to be an official mentoring. There's a verse in the Bible, Luke chapter 12, verse 48. To whom much is given, much is required. To whom more is given, even more is required. Now, that given is not from the standpoint of how some liberals twist things around from an entitlement standpoint. No, God has allowed me to live many years beyond the lifespan of my dad when I found him when he was dead on the floor. God has allowed me to live past acute kidney failure and cancer. And God has allowed me to have some fantastic experiences, good experiences and some bad experiences as well. And so let's pour our lives into other people's lives. Don't be like some people that they just keep it all to themselves. They're a hermit. Yeah, they might go to work, but they're still a hermit. And I remember one individual in particular because I did both the Air Force and the Marine Corps, but this individual was when I was in the Air Force. I was stationed down at Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, North Carolina, in the fire department. And the man that I was reporting to had been on active duty, but he was a civilian firefighter, federal civil service, and he was a hermit. And he always walked around with a scowl on his face. And you couldn't hardly get anything out of that guy.
Hmm.
I hated when I was assigned to his crew. I did not even want to be around that guy. What experiences did he have in life? I don't know. But he'd been around the fire service a long time. But he just absolutely isolated himself from everybody else. We had roughly, depending on the shift, the shift, I should say, 25 to 27 firefighters on duty. And he was the lone hermit, isolating himself. Don't be that person. Be the person who is transparent and willing to share your life. Because otherwise, like that guy, you're hiding behind a mask.
Yeah,
What
facade.
are you hiding? And people don't trust that. It's
Yeah,
like the other way around. Some people just they want to blab everything. Blah 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 blah. You gotta have a
wisdom.
balance and wisdom
Yeah,
with that. So going back to the beginning of the podcast, we talked about flying from Denver to Sacramento and looking out that clear window and being able to see the sunrise and the pinkish sunrise on the snow, on the mountains, and able to clearly see what was going on. And that's what we've been talking, excuse me, that's what we've been talking about today.
yeah. So transparency gives you perspective. It lets you see the beauty and the terrain that you're
Yeah,
navigating.
absolutely. Absolutely. So, as we wrap up this episode here, have you had a mentor who modeled transparency? Hey, let us know how mentoring has shaped your growth. And in a moment here, I'll tell you how you can let us know. So, that's it for today, episode number 38. We've been talking about the dual footprints of mentoring, and this particular episode is a commitment to be transparent, the power of clarity in mentorship. If you found this episode to be useful, please like, subscribe, and share. In the show notes, you will find my website, which is fireofficerleadershipacademy.com, and my email, rick@fireofficerleadershipacademy.com, where you can send an email. And also look at LinkedIn. I post a weekly leadership blog out there on Wednesdays, and on my website, you will find that same blog posted on Monday mornings. So that's about it for now. We're going to sign off. I am Jersey Rick. We'll see you later.
Co-host Emily.
Co-host Emily. All right. Thank you
Bye.
and goodbye till next time.